Lift the veil, your majesty, and let Silverpine finally see the bride fate chose for you." The ceremonial words echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling, and Emily Parker felt every person in the great hall stop breathing with her. She stood before Nathan Reed beneath hundreds of winter candles, her hands folded carefully over the ivory fabric of her wedding gown. Beyond the towering windows, snow covered the pine forests for miles, turning the kingdom outside into a silent white world. Inside, there was nowhere to hide. Nathan looked exactly as an alpha king was expected to look: composed, powerful, unreachable. At 32, he carried authority without raising his voice. His black ceremonial coat was edged with silver, his dark hair swept neatly back, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the veil covering Emily's face. She had met those eyes only twice before today. Neither time had lasted long enough for him to know her. "Proceed," the elder said. Nathan raised his hands. Emily's heartbeat climbed as his fingers reached the edge of the veil. She knew what waited beneath it. She had known since she was 16 what daylight allowed the world to see. Dark moonshade markings curved across one side of her pale face, changing the softness of her features beneath patterns no healer had ever understood. She had learned to recognize the moment strangers noticed them. First came surprise, then curiosity, sometimes pity, too often disgust disguised as politeness. The veil lifted. Nathan went still. It lasted perhaps 1 second, maybe less, but Emily saw it. The slight tightening around his eyes, the pause in his breath, the disappointment he buried before anyone else could accuse a king of showing it. A whisper traveled somewhere behind her. Another followed. Emily kept her chin level. She would not give them lowered eyes to remember. Nathan recovered first. "Emily Parker," he said, his voice controlled. "Do you accept the bond between Silverpine and your people and the duties that come with this crown?" Not me, she thought. The bond, the duties, the crown. "I do." Her answer did not tremble. Nathan completed his vow with equal precision. When the ceremony ended, applause filled the hall, beautiful and hollow. Emily turned beside her new husband and faced the court. Near the front stood Victoria Hayes in midnight blue, watching Emily with a smile too delicate to be called cruel. "How fortunate," Victoria murmured to the woman beside her, just loudly enough to carry, "that political marriages require loyalty rather than attraction." Emily heard it. Nathan heard it too. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That silence hurt more than Victoria's words. Emily looked toward the western windows. The winter sun was already descending, staining the snow beyond the palace with pale gold. Soon the daylight would disappear. Soon the moonshade would disappear with it. Nathan Reed believed he had just seen the face of the woman he had married. Emily watched the sinking sun and realized he had less than an hour left to keep believing it. The celebration continued around Emily as though nothing had happened, but she could still feel Victoria's words resting beneath every polite smile. Nathan remained beside her through the receiving line, formal and courteous, introducing her to council members, neighboring alphas, and families whose names she knew she would be expected to remember. He never embarrassed her. He never defended her either. By the time dinner ended, the winter sun had nearly reached the horizon. Emily was escorted upstairs by a young servant named Grace, who carried a small case containing the few belongings that had arrived ahead of her. "Your rooms are here, Your Majesty," Grace said, stopping before a carved oak door. Emily glanced across the corridor. Another door stood less than 15 feet away. Grace hesitated. "Those are the king's rooms." Emily understood immediately. Separate chambers. A marriage close enough for appearances and distant enough for comfort. "Thank you, Grace." The servant lowered her eyes. "I am sorry about what Lady Hayes said." Emily looked at her. Grace seemed horrified by her own boldness. "You have nothing to apologize for. I should not have mentioned it. You mentioned something that happened. That is different." Grace finally looked up, and Emily smiled. "You may call me Your Majesty in public. In here, you do not have to sound frightened every time you speak." A tiny smile appeared on Grace's face before she excused herself. Emily entered her room and found a fire already burning. She had barely removed her gloves when someone knocked. Nathan stood outside. "Are the rooms acceptable?" he asked. "They are beautiful. If you need anything, tell the steward." His gaze briefly met hers, then shifted toward the window. Emily followed it. Only a thin line of sunlight remained above the snowy trees. Her pulse quickened. Was there something else? Nathan asked. No. She moved toward the door. I am tired. He nodded. Of course. Good night, Emily. Good night, she thought. Not wife. Not anything warmer. Emily closed the door and turned the lock. She crossed quickly to the curtains, but stopped when voices drifted from the corridor. Victoria, you cannot expect the court not to notice, she was saying. Nathan answered quietly. Notice what? That you were disappointed. Silence. Emily stood motionless. Victoria continued. Silverpine expected a queen who could inspire the kingdom. She is the queen, Nathan said. That is not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. His voice had cooled. Footsteps followed, then silence returned. Emily did not know whether his answer should comfort her. It did not erase the moment beneath the veil. Outside, the final edge of the sun disappeared. Warmth spread slowly across her marked cheek. Emily faced the mirror. The dark moonshade patterns softened, faded, and vanished until the face looking back at her was the one darkness always returned. Same blue-gray eyes. Same chestnut hair. Same woman. Only the world's reaction ever changed. Emily touched the clear skin where the markings had been. Across the corridor, Nathan believed his unwanted bride was preparing to sleep. Instead, Emily reached for a dark cloak. For 7 years, nighttime had been the only place where strangers looked at her without deciding what she was worth. Tonight, somewhere beyond the palace windows, snow covered the path to the frozen lake, and for the first time since becoming queen, Emily wanted to breathe where no one knew her name. Emily waited until the corridor outside her room had gone completely quiet before fastening the dark cloak around her shoulders. The palace felt different after midnight, stripped of ceremony and judgment. Without courtiers filling its halls, Silverpine became stone, firelight, and silence. She slipped down a narrow staircase Grace had pointed out earlier and stepped through a side door into the winter air. Cold touched her face immediately, clean and sharp, carrying the scent of pine across the snow. The frozen lake lay less than half a mile beyond the palace gardens, silver beneath the moon. Emily followed the path slowly. She had been 16 the first morning the moonshade appeared. She still remembered waking to her mother's frightened silence and finding dark patterns spreading across her cheek in the mirror. By sunset, they had vanished. The next sunrise brought them back. 7 years of healers, herbal remedies, old books, and whispered theories had changed nothing. The rule remained impossibly simple. Sunrise returned the markings. Sundown took them away. People called the daylight face cursed and the nighttime face beautiful, as though either one could explain who Emily was. She had eventually stopped asking which face was real. Both belonged to her. The cruelty belonged to everyone who insisted one deserved kindness more than the other. At the lake, Emily stopped beside a wooden railing glazed with frost. Moonlight stretched across the frozen surface, and for several minutes, she simply breathed. No one stared. No one whispered. No one compared her to the queen they had imagined. She was not an unwanted bride here. She was only Emily. A faint sound came from the path behind her. She turned quickly. Nathan stood beneath the snow-covered branches about 30 feet away. Emily's breath caught. He had traded his ceremonial coat for a simpler black winter coat, but there was no mistaking his height, his dark hair, or those silver-gray eyes. For one terrible second, she expected recognition. Nathan looked directly at her face. Nothing changed. He did not know her. I did not mean to frighten you, he said. Emily pulled her hood slightly forward. You did. Not. You are either very calm or very convincing. Perhaps you are not as frightening as people tell you. One corner of his mouth almost lifted. Emily had not seen that expression during their wedding. Do you know who I am? Everyone in Silverpine knows who you are. Nathan stepped closer but stopped several feet away, leaving a respectful distance between them. Then you know wandering palace grounds after midnight is unusual. You are wandering them too. That nearly smile returned. Fair point. Emily looked toward the lake, afraid her eyes might betray too much. Nathan studied her for another moment. I do not remember seeing you at the ceremony. The words carried an irony so sharp she nearly laughed. There were many people there. I usually remember faces. Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of her cloak. Maybe faces are not always the most important thing to remember. Nathan became quiet. Something in her answer seemed to reach him. "What should I call you?" he asked. Emily hesitated. Giving him her real name felt impossible. Inventing someone entirely new felt worse. Then she remembered the name her mother had used before the Moonshade, before mirrors became complicated. M. Nathan repeated it softly. M. Above the frozen lake, moonlight touched the face he found beautiful, while less than an hour earlier he had barely known what to say to the same woman across the corridor. Nathan did not leave immediately, and Emily discovered that silence beside him felt strangely different from silence inside the palace. There, silence had been filled with everything neither of them wanted to say. Here, beneath the moon, it felt almost honest. He rested one gloved hand on the wooden railing and looked across the frozen lake. "Do you come here often, Em?" "Tonight is my first time." "Then we have something in common." Emily glanced at him. "The Alpha King has never visited his own lake. I have visited it as a king." His silver-gray eyes remained on the ice. "That is not the same thing." She understood more than she wanted to. "And who are you tonight?" Nathan considered the question. A man avoiding a palace full of people who believe they know what he should want. Emily almost smiled at the irony. "That sounds difficult. You do not sound sympathetic." "I am deciding whether you deserve sympathy." Nathan turned toward her, surprised, then laughed quietly. The sound caught Emily off guard. At the wedding, he had seemed carved from the same cold stone as Silverpine Palace. Here, his shoulders looked less rigid. "Most people decide before speaking to me," he said. "Perhaps that is the problem." His expression changed slightly. "You speak as though you know something about being judged too quickly." Emily looked down at the frost along the railing. "Most women do." It was true enough to hide everything else. Nathan nodded without pressing her. That restraint surprised her. "Was that why you left the celebration?" he asked. "Perhaps I wanted somewhere quieter." "So did I." Emily studied him for a moment. "You were married today. Should you not be with your wife?" Nathan's face became unreadable. "My marriage was arranged for the stability of Silverpine." "That was not my question." He looked at her then. The moon reflected faintly in his eyes. "My wife asked to rest." Emily remembered closing the door between them. "And you were relieved?" Nathan hesitated. The pause answered before his words could. "I did not know what to say to her." Emily felt the old ache return, but she kept her expression calm. "You could have started with kindness." "I was not unkind." "Those are not the same thing." Nathan went still. Emily wondered whether anyone had spoken to him this plainly in years. "You are very comfortable criticizing a king. You asked who I was tonight." Her gaze returned to the lake. "I am apparently someone with poor survival instincts." Nathan laughed again, softer this time. "I think you know exactly how far you can push." Emily smiled despite herself. Nathan noticed. For several seconds, he simply looked at her. Not at a crown. Not at an alliance. Not at moonshade markings. At her. The attention should have felt like victory. Instead, it hurt. "Your wife?" Emily said quietly. "Did you look at her long enough to know whether she was frightened today?" Nathan's amusement disappeared. He looked toward the palace glowing beyond the trees. "No." "Did you ask what she wanted?" "No." "Did you wonder what it felt like to stand before strangers while they decided whether she was good enough for you?" Nathan's jaw tightened, but not with anger. "No." Emily breathed slowly. "Then perhaps you do not dislike your wife. Perhaps you simply have not met her yet." Nathan stared at the distant palace for a long time. When he finally turned back, Emily saw something new in his face. Not love, not recognition. Something smaller, and perhaps more important. Doubt about himself. "Will you come here tomorrow night?" he asked. Emily pulled her cloak closer against the cold. "Why?" Nathan's answer came quietly. "Because tonight you told me the truth when everyone else spent the day telling me what I wanted to hear." Emily looked at the man who had married her before sunset and met her after dark without knowing they were the same woman. "Perhaps," she said. Then she walked toward the palace, leaving Nathan beside the frozen lake with the first questions he should have asked hours ago. Morning returned the moonshade before Emily woke, but something else had changed during the night. She stood before the mirror while pale winter light spread across her room, studying the dark patterns that had settled over her cheek once again. Nathan had looked into these same blue-gray eyes beside the frozen lake and listened to her as though every word mattered. Yet yesterday, when those markings covered her face, he had barely known how to speak to her. The contradiction followed Emily downstairs. She found Grace supervising two servants near the western corridor, where cold air slipped through aging window frames. One servant rubbed her hands together for warmth while trying to arrange fresh linens. "How cold does this wing become at night?" Emily asked. Grace hesitated. "Sometimes below 55 degrees, Your Majesty." Emily touched the wooden frame and felt the draft immediately. "Has anyone requested repairs?" "Several times." Grace lowered her voice. "There are always more important expenses." Emily looked down the corridor toward the servants' rooms. "Not to the people sleeping here." Before breakfast, she asked the household steward for repair estimates, additional firewood, and a list of families on the estate who might need winter supplies. Nathan heard about it before she finished her tea. He entered the breakfast room carrying several council documents, then stopped when he saw Emily speaking with Grace. "Good morning," he said. Emily looked up. "Good morning." His gaze rested on her longer than it had the previous day. She wondered whether some part of him heard him in her voice. "The steward tells me you have reorganized half my morning." I asked him 3 questions. Apparently, they were expensive questions. Emily expected irritation. Instead, Nathan pulled out the chair across from her. "The western windows should have been repaired before winter." "Then we agree." "It appears so." Grace placed coffee beside him. Nathan thanked her by name. Emily noticed because yesterday he had not. Later, while crossing the main hall, Emily found a young kitchen helper struggling to gather apples that had rolled from a basket. Several courtiers walked around him without stopping. Emily crouched and picked up the nearest apple. Grace joined her. Within seconds, the basket was full again. "Thank you, Your Majesty," the boy said, staring at her moonshade markings before quickly lowering his eyes. Emily handed him the final apple. "You may look at me when you speak." The boy slowly raised his gaze. She smiled. From the staircase above, Nathan watched the entire exchange. That evening, Emily told herself she would not return to the lake. She lasted until 20 minutes after sunset. When she finally reached the snowy path, Nathan was already waiting beside the railing. "You came," he said. "You sound surprised." "You said perhaps." "Perhaps occasionally means yes." Nathan smiled, but his expression soon became thoughtful. "My wife asked for repairs to the western wing today." Emily kept her face calm. "How terrible." She also arranged additional firewood and winter supplies. Truly reckless behavior. A quiet laugh escaped him. Then he looked across the frozen lake. "I think I judged her before giving her any reason to deserve it." Emily felt. The words settled between them. "And what changed?" Nathan turned toward her. "I started paying attention." Her chest tightened. "That is a beginning." "Only a beginning?" "Attention is easy when someone surprises you." Emily held his gaze beneath the moonlight. Respect is what remains when they stop being surprising. Nathan became silent. Then his eyes narrowed slightly, studying her expression with sudden concentration. "You know," he said slowly, "my wife said something today that sounded very much like something you would say. Perhaps your wife is simply more interesting than you expected." Emily kept her tone light, but Nathan did not smile. His attention remained fixed on her face, as though the answer to a question he had not yet formed might be hidden somewhere between her eyes and the curve of her mouth. She told the steward that comfort is not a luxury when people are expected to work through winter, he said. "You told me last night that kindness and absence of cruelty are not the same thing." Emily looked toward the frozen lake. "Neither thought belongs exclusively to me." "No." Nathan leaned against the frost-covered railing. "But both made me uncomfortable for the same reason. Because they were true. Because I needed strangers to tell me things I should have understood myself." The honesty surprised her. Cold wind moved through the pines, carrying loose snow across the path. Emily pulled her cloak closer. "Understanding late is better than never understanding." Nathan gave a humorless smile. "That sounds suspiciously forgiving." "It is not." His eyes returned to hers. "Good." Emily frowned. "Good. I do not think I have earned forgiveness." For a moment, neither spoke. The palace glowed through the trees behind them, warm windows floating against the dark. Emily could have changed the subject. Instead, she asked the question that had followed her since the wedding. "When you saw your wife beneath the veil, what did you think?" Nathan's shoulders stiffened. "You really do choose easy conversations." "You can refuse to answer." "No." He looked down at his gloved hands. "I was disappointed." Emily had known. Hearing it still hurt. "Why?" "Because I had spent months resenting a marriage I did not choose, and when I finally saw her, I allowed her appearance to become another reason to resent it. He paused. That was unfair. Emily swallowed against the pressure in her throat. If she had my face, would you have treated her differently? Nathan looked at her. The question seemed to strip away every comfortable answer available to him. Emily waited. She did not want courtesy. She wanted truth. At last, Nathan said, yes. One word. Clean and terrible. Emily's gaze dropped to the moonlit ice. Nathan continued quietly. I wish the answer were different. But it is not. No. Emily nodded once. Then you do not deserve either woman yet. Nathan went completely still. She expected wounded pride, perhaps anger. Instead, he accepted the words in silence. Either woman, he repeated after a moment. Emily realized her mistake. Her heartbeat quickened, but she kept her expression composed. Your wife and whatever woman you imagine you could love more easily. Nathan studied her. And you think those are the only choices? I think attraction is easy when nothing challenges it. Emily turned toward him. Character is what you do when the person in front of you does not match the picture you wanted. Nathan's jaw tightened, not defensively but thoughtfully. You make me sound shallow. I did not make you answer yes. The words landed between them. Nathan looked away first. No, you did not. Emily felt no victory. She had wanted him to deny it, even if some foolish part of her new denial would have been a lie. Nathan drew a slow breath. What would you have me do? Stop asking someone else how to become worthy of your wife. He looked back at her. Pay attention to her. Listen when she speaks. Learn who she is without waiting for her to become easier to admire. Emily stepped away from the railing. And if you discover she is nothing like the woman you wanted? Nathan's answer came more slowly this time. Then perhaps I need to question the man who decided what he wanted. Emily held his gaze for one quiet heartbeat. It was not redemption. It was not enough. But it was the first answer he had given her. That did not make the night feel colder. Morning found Emily seated beside a tall eastern window with a cup of tea growing cold between her hands. Nathan's answer from the lake had followed her through the night. Yes, he would have treated his wife differently if she had possessed M's face. The honesty had hurt, but his final words had remained with her too. Perhaps I need to question the man who decided what he wanted. Emily heard footsteps and looked up as Nathan entered the breakfast room. His gaze met hers immediately. This time, he did not look away from the moonshade markings across her cheek. Good morning, Emily. Good morning. He took the chair across from her. Grace arrived with coffee, and Nathan thanked her by name again. Emily noticed the effort, but said nothing. The western windows will be inspected this afternoon, he said. The steward believes repairs can begin this week. That quickly. You were right. They should have been repaired months ago. Emily studied him. Thank you. Nathan nodded, accepting the words without turning them into something larger. Later that morning, they walked together through the greenhouse while discussing winter supplies for families living near the northern boundary. Emily stopped beside a table of rosemary and asked whether elderly residents received additional firewood during severe weather. Nathan did not know. Instead of pretending otherwise, he wrote the question down. Something about that small action unsettled her. He was listening, truly listening. As they turned toward the doorway, Grace hurried toward them carrying several household records. One sheet slipped loose and drifted across the floor. Emily caught it before it reached the damp stones near the greenhouse entrance. You saved me from rewriting 3 pages, Grace said with relief. Emily smiled. Then I have accomplished something important today. Nathan stopped. His expression changed. Emily's smile faded. What is it? Nothing. But his eyes remained on her face. That evening, Nathan reached the frozen lake first. Emily arrived beneath a clear sky bright with stars and found him staring across the ice. You are becoming predictable, she said. He turned. So are you. Emily approached the railing. Nathan inhaled quietly as the wind shifted between them. His wolf stirred with sudden attention. There it was again, a scent he had noticed near Emily that morning. Winter rose, cedar, and something warm beneath both. He looked at him. Same scent. His rational mind supplied explanations. Shared palace soap. The same gardens. The same fireplaces. Yet his wolf rejected every one. Why are you staring at me? Emily asked. I am thinking. That sounds dangerous. Nathan almost smiled. Then he said, Your eyes are blue-gray. Emily's pulse stumbled. An extraordinary discovery. Emily's eyes are blue-gray. So are thousands of other people's. You smile the same way. Her fingers tightened around the railing. Now you are comparing smiles? And you both tilt your head slightly when you think I have said something foolish. Emily deliberately straightened her head. Nathan noticed. Silence stretched between them. He could have demanded answers. He could have followed her when she left. Instead, he stepped back. You told me to learn who my wife is, he said. I intend to. Emily searched his face. Then why are you asking questions about me? I am not. Nathan's voice was calm. Not tonight. He looked toward the palace. If there is something you want me to know, I will wait until you choose to tell me. Relief and fear arrived together inside her. That is unexpectedly respectful. Do not sound so shocked. Emily smiled despite herself. Nathan's wolf stirred again with absolute recognition. Same scent, same eyes, same smile. The impossible thought returned, stronger than before. Nathan looked at the woman beneath the moon, then toward the palace where his wife supposedly remained behind a locked door. He said nothing, but for the first time, he was no longer wondering why Emily reminded him of him. He was wondering whether there had ever been two women at all. The invitation arrived before breakfast, sealed with silver wax, and carrying Victoria Hayes's unmistakably elegant handwriting. Emily read it twice before placing it beside her untouched tea. The winter moon reception would begin at 4. That afternoon, with the final royal toast scheduled precisely at sunset. Grace stood near the window, watching Emily's expression. Is something wrong, Your Majesty? Emily looked toward the pale morning sky. Lady Hayes has excellent timing. By noon, the palace was alive with preparations. Silver garlands appeared along the great hall. Crystal glasses covered the banquet tables, and servants opened the western curtains to reveal miles of snow-covered hills. Emily noticed those uncovered windows immediately. Victoria had been watching her. Not closely enough to understand the moonshade, perhaps, but closely enough to notice that the new queen disappeared before every sunset. At 3:30, Grace helped Emily fasten an ivory gown embroidered with tiny silver leaves. The moonshade markings curved clearly across her pale cheek. You could say you are ill, Grace suggested softly. Emily shook her head. Then she learns that all she has to do is choose the hour, and I will run. When Emily entered the great hall beside Nathan, conversation softened for half a heartbeat before recovering. Nathan noticed. His expression cooled, but he said nothing. Victoria approached in a deep blue gown, smiling as though the evening existed only to welcome the queen. Your Majesty, I was afraid you might be too tired to attend. How thoughtful of you to worry. Victoria's smile sharpened slightly. The final toast should be beautiful. Sunset through those windows is one of Silverpine's finest sights. Emily met her eyes. So I have heard. Nathan glanced between them. His wolf stirred with the same unease that had followed him from the frozen lake. He had promised not to demand answers from Em, and he had kept that promise. But now he noticed Emily checking the western windows every few minutes. By 5, the sun had begun descending toward the hills. Emily could feel time in her body before she saw it in the sky. Warmth would begin beneath the markings soon. She needed to leave. Nathan approached while the musicians changed songs. Are you all right? Yes. That answer arrived too quickly. Emily almost smiled. You have become observant. I was told I needed practice. There. Eyes met. Something passed between them. Too familiar for strangers and too complicated for newlyweds. Nathan lowered his voice. If you want to leave, I will handle the court. Emily stared at him. Days ago, he would have accepted her disappearance without wondering why. Now he was offering protection without asking for the secret in return. Thank you, she said. Before she could move, a sharp clatter came from behind them. Grace stood beside one of the banquet tables, staring at a crystal glass lying on its side. Sparkling cider had spilled across the white tablecloth and onto the edge of Victoria's sleeve. I am terribly sorry, Grace said. Victoria looked at the stain, then at the servant. You have been careless twice this week. Grace's face lost its color. It was an accident. Accidents become habits when no one corrects them. Emily turned fully toward Victoria. Outside the western windows, the sun touched the snowy hills. Perhaps 10 minutes remained. Nathan quietly said her name. Emily. She knew what he meant. Go. She could leave now. Protect the secret. Protect herself. Then Grace lowered her eyes and whispered, I am sorry, Your Majesty. Please go. I will be fine. Emily looked at the frightened young woman, then at the dying sunlight. Victoria was watching both. The trap had finally closed, but not in the way Victoria expected. Emily stepped away from the exit and moved to Grace's side. "No," she said quietly. "You will not stand here alone." "Then let them see me." Emily's voice was quiet, but the words carried farther than she intended. The nearest conversation stopped. Grace stared at her, frightened, while Victoria's carefully composed expression shifted for the first time that evening. "Your Majesty, this is unnecessary," Victoria said. Emily moved beside Grace instead of toward the exit. "What is unnecessary is humiliating someone over a spilled glass." Victoria glanced at the cider staining her sleeve. "A royal household requires standards. Then let us apply them fairly." Emily looked toward the table. Grace was carrying a tray through a crowded room. Someone stepped into her path. She prevented everything except one glass from falling. Grace's eyes widened. Emily had noticed. Victoria apparently had not expected anyone important to care. "There should still be consequences for carelessness," Victoria replied. "There should be consequences for deliberate cruelty too," Emily said. Silence spread across the hall. Nathan stood several feet away, watching her with an expression Emily could not read. Outside the western windows, the sun sank lower. 5 minutes, perhaps less. Warmth had already begun beneath the moonshade markings. Nathan noticed Emily's fingers tighten against her gown. He approached slowly. "Emily, you may leave." His voice was low enough that only those nearest could hear. She looked at him. There was no suspicion in his eyes now, only concern. He was giving her the escape she needed without demanding to know why she needed it. For one heartbeat, Emily almost accepted. Then Grace whispered, "Please go, Your Majesty. I will be all right." Emily knew that sentence too well. She had spent 7 years saying versions of it whenever other people's comfort seemed easier to protect than her own dignity. She turned toward Grace. No one should have to pretend they are fine simply because the person judging them has more power. Nathan's expression changed. Something settled behind his silver-gray eyes, deeper than curiosity. Emily faced Victoria again. "Grace stays." Victoria folded her hands. "And will the Queen stay for the final toast?" There it was. The real challenge. Emily looked through the windows. The sun touched the horizon, turning the snow gold. She could still walk away. Perhaps she had 60 seconds. Perhaps less. Her secret had protected her from ridicule. But tonight protecting it would require abandoning someone who had done nothing wrong. Emily breathed slowly. "Yes." Nathan stepped closer. "Are you certain?" She met his gaze. "If my dignity survives only when someone weaker than me is abandoned, then it was never dignity." Nathan went completely still. The words seemed to reach somewhere no argument ever had. He looked at Emily as though he were seeing her for the first time, and the realization struck her with unexpected force. This was happening before the transformation, before the face he admired beneath moonlight appeared, before M could exist in his eyes. Nathan was looking at Emily, moonshade and all, with something that resembled respect. The final sunlight narrowed across the marble floor. Warmth spread from Emily's temple toward her cheek. A murmur rose from the nearest guests as the dark markings began to soften. Victoria turned sharply. Grace stared. Nathan did not move. The last edge of the sun disappeared behind the hills. Emily felt the moonshade fading, exactly as it had every evening for 7 years. The hall fell silent as her natural features emerged beneath the candlelight. Nathan's breath caught. Same blue-gray eyes. Same scent. Same smile. Same woman. Every impossible piece finally became one truth. Emily watched recognition cross his face. Nathan whispered the name he had known only beneath the moon. M. Nathan said it again, barely above a whisper, and Emily felt the name travel through the silent hall like a truth neither of them could take back. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her transformed face, but she watched only him. Recognition moved through Nathan slowly, painfully. The woman beside the frozen lake. The wife across the breakfast table. The voice that challenged him at night. The queen who noticed cold rooms during the day. There had never been 2 women. There had only been Emily, and he had divided her into the woman he struggled to accept and the woman he wanted to know. "It was you," he said. Emily lifted her chin. "Every night." Nathan took one instinctive step toward her, then stopped himself. "Why did you not tell me?" The question held confusion rather than accusation, but Emily still felt 7 years of judgment rise inside her. "When would you have believed me?" Nathan said nothing. When you lifted my veil and disappointment crossed your face. When you arranged separate rooms before asking a single question about me. Or when you told him that you would have treated your wife differently if she had possessed another face. His expression tightened. Around them, whispers began spreading through the court. Victoria stared at Emily as though the evening had escaped entirely from her control. This must be some kind of enchantment, she said. The court deserves an explanation. Nathan turned toward her. No. The single word silenced the nearest guests. The Queen does not owe this room an explanation simply because everyone has discovered something they were never entitled to know. Emily looked at him, surprised. Nathan faced the gathered nobles. The reception is over. No one challenged him. Guests began leaving beneath restrained whispers, while Grace remained near Emily until the last moment. Thank you, Grace whispered. Emily squeezed her hand gently. You did nothing wrong. When the great doors finally closed, only Emily and Nathan remained beneath the chandeliers. He did not approach her. What happens at sunrise? He asked. The moonshade returns. Every morning? For 7 years. Nathan looked toward the dark windows. And every sunset? It disappears. His gaze returned to her. So M was never a disguise. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. No, neither face is a disguise. You were the one who decided they belonged to different women. Nathan absorbed the words without defending himself. You are right. Emily had expected excuses. His agreement somehow hurt more. She turned toward the doors. Emily. She stopped, but did not face him. I am sorry. Sorry is where you begin. Her voice remained steady. It is not where you finish. I know. Emily finally looked back. Nathan's silver-gray eyes held none of the fascination she had feared after the transformation. Only regret. Still, she needed to ask. Which face made you finally believe I was worth knowing? Nathan's breath slowed. The question settled heavily between them. He could have offered the answer she wanted. He could have lied beautifully. Instead, his eyes lowered. The wrong one, he said. Emily felt the honesty strike deep. Nathan looked at her again. But the woman who stayed beside Grace tonight was Emily before the sun disappeared. I saw that. Her throat tightened. Seeing it once does not erase everything before it. No. Nathan stepped aside, leaving the doorway open. Then I will not ask you to forgive me tonight. Emily walked past him. At the threshold, she paused. What will you ask? Nathan looked toward the empty hall where the court had judged her twice in a single evening. Nothing. His voice was quiet. I will give you reasons to decide for yourself who I become next. Emily woke before sunrise, not because she had slept well, but because she wanted to watch the change happen without fear. She stood before the mirror as gray morning light slowly entered her room. Warmth moved across her cheek, and the dark moonshade markings returned exactly as they had every morning for 7 years. Nothing about the reflection surprised her. What surprised her was the knock at the door. Grace entered carrying tea, her expression gentle and unchanged. Good morning, Your Majesty. Her eyes did not linger on the markings. Emily accepted the cup. Good morning, Grace. The western windows are being inspected again today. The steward says the repairs will begin this week. Emily looked up. Nathan approved them. Before dawn. That was only the beginning. By breakfast, additional firewood had been assigned to the coldest servant rooms, and the estate office had received instructions to identify families needing winter supplies. Nathan had announced none of it to Emily. He had simply acted on the things she had already told him mattered. She found him later in the council chamber, where Victoria and several senior council members stood around the long wooden table. Emily paused outside the open doorway when she heard Victoria speak. The court is unsettled. Surely the Queen's condition should be examined publicly before rumors become worse. Nathan remained at the head of the table. No. A councilman cleared his throat. Your Majesty, people will want reassurance. Then reassure them that their Queen's private condition is not public entertainment. Victoria's expression tightened. But appearances matter to a crown. Nathan looked directly at her. That belief is precisely how I failed my wife. Emily stopped breathing for a moment. Nathan continued before anyone could answer. Yesterday, before sunset, Emily stood beside a servant when protecting herself would have been easier. Her face had not changed yet. Her character required no transformation. Victoria lowered her gaze. I meant no disrespect. Then respect should be easy to demonstrate from this point forward. Nathan turned to the household steward. Grace will face no disciplinary action for the reception. Any future complaint involving palace staff will be reviewed privately and fairly. No servant will be publicly embarrassed for another person's amusement. Emily stepped into the room. Nathan saw her immediately. His eyes settled on the moonshade markings across her cheek, then met her gaze without hesitation. He did not smile as though expecting praise. "Good morning, Emily." "Good morning." The council members quietly excused themselves. Victoria followed, leaving Emily and Nathan several feet apart. "You did not need me here for that," Emily said. "No. You could have told me you were going to do it. Then it might have sounded like I was performing regret for you." Emily studied him. "And you are not." "I am trying not to." Nathan drew a slow breath. "You told me to pay attention. I finally did. The problems were already here before you arrived." Emily looked toward the documents on the table. "One morning of good decisions does not change what happened." "I know." Again, no defense. No request for forgiveness. Nathan reached for a sealed notice and placed it on the table between them. "I have also prohibited anyone at court from demanding demonstrations or explanations of the moonshade." Emily's eyes lifted sharply. "You did that without asking me." Nathan paused. "I protected your right to choose whether you explain it. I did not choose the explanation for you. The distinction mattered." Emily hated that it mattered. Nathan stepped away from the table. "Tomorrow, I am assembling the court in the great hall before sunrise." Her expression hardened. "Why?" "Because last night they saw something extraordinary and immediately decided that was the part of you worth discussing." "And tomorrow?" Nathan looked toward the eastern windows, where morning light now illuminated every dark marking on Emily's face. "Tomorrow they are going to see what I should have seen first." Emily felt her heartbeat slow. "What is that?" Nathan held her gaze. "Their queen." The great hall looked different before sunrise. Without music, candles, or glittering glasses, there was nothing to distract from the people gathered beneath its vaulted ceiling. Emily stood near the eastern windows while the court waited in uneasy silence. Outside, the world was still dark blue, but a thin silver line had begun forming above the distant pines. She wore a simple ivory gown with no veil and no jewelry except the small silver clasp at her collar. Her face was clear beneath the fading night. Several nobles stared openly now, fascinated by the woman they had praised after sundown. Emily felt the familiar discomfort settle in her chest. Their admiration was only another kind of judgment if it depended on darkness. Nathan stood near the throne but did not sit. Victoria remained among the council families, unusually quiet. "Why did you call them here?" Emily asked softly. Nathan looked toward the windows. "Wait." The first edge of sunlight appeared. Emily felt warmth beneath her skin. A murmur moved through the hall as the moonshade began returning across her pale cheek, first like faint shadows, then darkening into the familiar patterns she had carried for 7 years. Emily kept her eyes forward. She had experienced thousands of sunrises, but never one before an audience waiting to watch her change. The whispers grew louder. Nathan remained still until the transformation was complete. Only then did he move. He stepped away from the throne and walked toward Emily. The room became silent. He stopped several feet from her, leaving enough distance that she understood the choice would remain hers. When Emily arrived at Silver Pine, Nathan said, addressing the court, "I looked at her and decided what I believed before learning anything about her. I mistook appearance for truth and silence for fairness." Emily stared at him. Nathan did not turn away from her markings. "Then I watched this woman notice servants whose names I had forgotten to learn. I watched her question why people were cold while those with authority called repairs unimportant. I watched her stand beside someone with less power when walking away would have protected her own secret." His gaze moved across the gathered court. "Some of you admired her last night only after sunset changed what you could see. Do not make the mistake I made." Victoria lowered her eyes. Nathan looked back at Emily. "This is the woman I married. This is the woman I failed. And this is the queen I choose." He extended one hand, but did not reach for hers. Emily looked down at it. 7 years of memories passed through her mind. Mirrors turned toward walls. Invitations declined before sunset. Strangers suddenly becoming kinder after darkness changed her face. Nathan could command a kingdom to respect her. He could not command her to trust him. His open hand asked instead of demanded. Emily raised her eyes to his. "Choosing me publicly is easier than knowing me privately." Then I will keep learning privately, even when there is no audience. Especially then. Something inside her loosened. Not completely. Healing did not arrive like magic simply because the right words were spoken, but trust could begin in smaller places. Emily slowly placed her hand in his. Nathan closed his fingers gently around hers and turned with her toward the court. He did not raise their joined hands like a victory. He simply stood beside her. Morning sunlight filled the great hall, illuminating every moonshade marking without apology. No one laughed. No one whispered. Emily looked toward the windows and realized that for the first time in 7 years, sunrise had not felt like something she needed to survive. It had felt like something she had chosen to face. By late afternoon, the story of the sunrise gathering had traveled through every corridor of Silverpine Palace, but Emily discovered she no longer cared what version of it people repeated. She spent the day reviewing winter supply requests with Grace, approving repairs to the western wing, and learning the names of families living beyond the northern ridge. Nathan did not hover beside her. He did not turn his public declaration into a demand for closeness. He attended council meetings, answered questions, and gave Emily the space he had promised. That mattered more than another apology. Near sundown, Emily found a folded note outside her door. "Meet me where you first told me the truth." No signature was necessary. She waited until the sun was low before walking toward the frozen lake. Snow had begun falling gently, covering the path in a thin white layer. Nathan stood beside the familiar wooden railing, his black coat dusted with flakes. When Emily approached, he smiled. "I was not certain you would come. You seem to say that often. Perhaps I should become more confident. Perhaps you should earn the confidence first." Nathan laughed softly. "Fair." Emily stopped beside him. Across the lake, the final sunlight burned gold between the pine trees. Neither spoke for a while. She appreciated that he did not fill every silence anymore. "Do you remember what you asked me the first night?" she said. Nathan thought for a moment. "Who you were. And I gave you half an answer." Emily nodded. "It was the name my mother used when I was young, before the Moonshade appeared. Afterward, people began treating the girl before 16 as though she had disappeared." Nathan looked at her. "Did you believe them?" For a while, Emily watched the horizon. "Then I realized I had not changed nearly as much as everyone around me had." The sun touched the distant hills. Warmth moved beneath her cheek. Nathan saw the moonshade beginning to fade, but his expression remained exactly the same. Emily watched him carefully. The markings softened. Darkness arrived. Her nighttime face emerged beneath the moonlight, the face that had once made Nathan stop beside this lake and see a stranger worth knowing. He did not stare. He did not step closer. He simply continued looking into her eyes. Emily felt something unexpectedly tender settle inside her. "Nothing?" she asked. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Was I supposed to do something? The first time you saw this face, you could barely stop looking at it." Regret crossed his features. "I remember." Emily turned toward him fully. There was one question she had carried since their wedding, and she needed its answer before she could decide what came next. "Which face do you love?" Nathan became very still. Snow gathered along the railing between them. "That is the wrong question." Emily's expression tightened. "Then give me the right answer." Nathan took a breath. "I love the woman behind both." Emily searched his face for hesitation and found none. "The woman who challenged me when I deserved it. The woman who stopped for a servant when everyone else kept walking. The woman who taught me that being powerful does not mean being right. Emily, I met you twice because I failed to recognize you once." Her throat tightened. Nathan did not reach for her. He waited. Emily closed the distance herself and placed her hand in his. "This does not mean everything is forgiven. I know. Trust takes time. Then I will give it time." They stood together as snow drifted across the frozen lake. Tomorrow morning, the moonshade would return. The court would see it. Nathan would see it. The entire kingdom might spend years deciding what they believed about their queen. Emily could not control that. But as she looked toward the eastern sky where another sunrise would eventually come, she realized she was no longer afraid of being seen. For 7 years, she had believed darkness gave her freedom because darkness changed her face. Now she understood something better. Freedom was standing beneath any sky without wishing to become someone else. Nathan gently held her hand, and Emily smiled. Tomorrow morning, she would still be herself. This time, she would not hide.